Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Ozcast.
What a Sunday afternoon that was in Sydney. As good as it can possibly get. It was a game we went into, Drew Jones, with low expectations. There wasn't too much excitement around what we were capable of. And we produced our best performance of the season, our best win of the season, and one that actually gives us serious hope now that we can make something of this campaign and still contend. It was an awesome day out that washed away all of our blues, pardon the pun.
Yeah, Garby, great to be with you, and in very happy circumstances. A lack of expectation can sometimes be a really beautiful thing. I was hopeful, but not certainly expecting a victory, and was pleasantly surprised by, absolute A for effort. I thought some of the work from the youngsters was really impressive, gave us a nice glimpse into the future, and certainly showed that, I guess, the external hope that West Coast Iraqi has put in the youngsters is probably justified, and great to see them get an opportunity to show us what they can do. And they didn't let anyone down. And we were helped by Carlton failing to take a really great opportunity to beat us, and we were clearly under strength. We had 5 players who'd played less than 10 games and missing, probably 5 or 6 of our best 10 players. But we produced a gritty, gutsy performance, and the leaders stood up. So we saw leadership, we saw a bit of fight, everything we wanted to see, Garby. We had it all.
Classy ball movement, solid defence, individuals, taking charge of games like Nick Natanui and Liam Ryan, who was just mesmerising. We'll get onto that in a moment. So before we break down the game, I was lucky enough to do the boundary for the game for ABC. So I got to watch the Eagles really close up, actually closer up than when you commentate, because when you're on the boundary, you see so many things on the bench and you can monitor things between the players as they come on and off. So you've got a great view in that sense. And something stood out for me more than any other. I tweeted about it, but Elliot Yeo, I've done quite a few games on the boundary, as you have, Drew, and usually players on the boundary. So at the start of the game, they're usually a bit tense, waiting to come on. And then during the game, they're usually so buggered and trying to consume energy to go back out there. They don't really do too much on the bench. They have a chat between themselves, get on the phone a little bit, talk to the coaches, and they're back out there. I've never seen a player as animated on the bench from any team in the AFL than Elliot Yeo was on the weekend. He was riding every single bump and tackle and kick and hand pass. He was getting so furious when someone missed a tackle or hit up the wrong teammate, or if we missed an opportunity in front of goal. He was going nuts at the bench, I think, because he was still on managed minutes, played 66% of game time. And I think he wanted to say to them at one stage, it's a close game, I feel fine. Stuff this managed minutes, just get me out there. Wasn't surprised at all when he started the blue at 3/4 time, because you could see the mist starting to boil over in his face. And then he was just so thrilled and encouraging, right? So that sounds a bit negative. He was really positive in all of that sense and so encouraging to the youngsters. He had messages for them every time they came off or went back on the ground. You could see him getting into their ear and trying to give them some advice. It was just that exact bit of leadership, Drew, that we've been talking about all season that's been missing from the team. Elliot Yeo provides it in spades. It was great to watch, and you saw all this pent-up frustration and anger from a year out boiling over into a win he wanted so badly, and he played such a big role on and off the field in ensuring it happened.
Yeah, it should be heartening, I reckon, for most West Coast fans to hear that, because it's exactly the sort of thing that we want to see from our side, and Yeo, no doubt, has added something since he's come back into the side. I reckon people will probably walk a bit taller with him in the midfield, the way that he attacks the ball and the man as well. But it just felt like the Eagles were engaged. They looked like they were up for the fight, and the backs to the wall mentality seemed to suit them. It did in that St Kilda game last year, where it was comparable in terms of the amount of injuries and the personnel that were missing. And Yeo was one of many to stand up. So it's great. I'm quite jealous, actually, that you had the opportunity to do that. There were a few times whilst I was doing boundary for K-Rock that West Coast games came up on the roster, but I wasn't asked to do them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm actually quite jealous that you got that opportunity to see the players up close. just a little bit different when it's the team you support.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that reflects really well the mental attitude and the aptitude that the Eagles showed on Sunday to get that win.
The other thing we do that I haven't seen other teams do is, and I noticed it before the game started, there are laptops set up at the back of the bench for all the assistant coaches. The players are actually shown vision during the game. They come off the bench, the midfielders, they turn to the back, and they've got vision coming through. Like they're all huddling around watching a TV series. It had like Yo, Redden, Gaffey, like all gathered around watching, obviously, centre bounce kind of work and so on. And they go back out and they're like, yep, okay, I know what to do. So I'm not saying it makes a massive difference, but it's the little things that I noticed the Eagles do that maybe some other clubs don't. That was really interesting watching that happen. So, yeah, great afternoon. The youngsters, I mean, we went into the game with Xavier O'Neill, Luke Edwards, Harry Edwards, Bailey Williams, and I'm forgetting one more, who weren't even
Luke Foley.
Luke Foley, who weren't even born the last time we won at the SCG, and Jack Petrocelli was a month old. And we went there and we finally broke the hoodoo. So, you know, awesome that happened. And they gave us so much. None of them let us down. Bailey Williams had a tough day. We'll get onto him in a moment. But the Foley goal, which, I mean, how the lads get around him, how good was that? Luke Edwards, excellent. So clean, so composed. Harry Edwards, I reckon that's his best game he's had. He's had a few good ones, but he was fantastic down back. And I loved Xavier O'Neill's game. I saw someone on Twitter saying he's not AFL standard. I can't understand that. I thought he played really well. And he gives us something up forward as well. He floats down there and takes a mark and kicks a big goal in the last quarter to seal things. I thought Xavier was really good. So all the youngsters, apart from Bailey, who probably needs a bit of a rest now, were fantastic.
Yeah, it was pleasing to get something out of the young guys. I mean, Luke Edwards early, God, he was composed. Like for a bloke who, obviously it's his AFL debut and there'd be some nerves there. Any debutant would be lying if they said that they weren't feeling it. This is a lifelong dream that he's realising. He's only 19 years old in a few months. He's played a bit of senior footy at Glenelg in the lead up to being drafted. But yeah, every time he got the ball, there was no panic. He seemed to know where to be. He got into good spots. Hands were really clean. Skills looked good. And interestingly, listening back to Tyson Edwards, that was a lot of what he said about Luke. Positionally quite aware, would be adept at playing in different roles because of his understanding of the game. So, he fitted in really well, particularly in the first half, playing in that wing position, probably quieting down a little in the second, but then Luke Foley stepped up and he looked really solid at half back. Looks like the prototypical West Coast half back, doesn't he? long kick, accurate with his skills and defended pretty stoutly. And then we got contributions here and there from other young players. Xavier, stepping up late to kick that goal. Looked like it meant a lot to him, didn't it? After he sort of messed up Liam Ryan's hanger, that opportunity to kick that goal was missed, but he didn't. He didn't blink at the opportunity later in the game. So, yeah, and Garby, we'll get to it obviously with the votes, but boy, the leaders stood up when required, particularly in the last quarter and particularly in the midfield. Sam Walsh was having an absolute stormer, and we know that Paddy Cripps is a big boy, but Nick Natanui was awesome. He smashed Pitnet.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
He took him to the cleaners. So, yeah, good on the leaders for doing what they had to do and dragging us over the line, and we got contributions from the youngsters as well.
Yeah, and in Nick's first game as captain, and I was lucky enough to interview him after the game, and he said, look, I'm not a Luke Shuey, Shannon Hearn type captain. I don't have their words. But apparently his speech, as Harry Edwards said today, was really good to the players. And he said, I just try to go out there and have fun. He said that in the post-match interview a couple of times, Nick, that the theme was almost get out there and have fun. Like just go out there and play freedom footy. And the youngsters help you provide that. But he obviously wanted to just go out there and just smash Pitternet about, which he did. And Pitternet by the end of the game just looked like he wanted to hide somewhere. Like, I've had enough of this. I'm just being absolutely mauled. And that's what Nick does best. And look, we came up against a team, I think that was the perfect matchup. And I probably should have considered this a bit more in my tip for the game when I felt as though Carlton would win, is that we know our midfield's our Achilles heel at the moment because of the players we're missing and Elliot Yeo's on managed minutes. But they don't have a midfield. That's why Carlton are struggling. All this talk about the Blues and where they're at and these reviews and all that. Like, it's not hard to break down what their issues are. They have Sam Walsh. They have Cripps, who breaks down every 3 weeks pretty much and can't get through a game properly, like is what happened on the weekend. Ed Kerno, who tries, and that's it. Like, Paddy Dow, Setterfield, they aren't up to it. Like, they're just not performing at all. Zach Williams is not a proper midfielder. So we were actually able to exploit a team in that regard, as opposed to us being exploited, because we had the better numbers in there. Nick was at his best, and Sheed and Gaffey and Redden had good games, and Yowie was the bull again. And we just dominated the clearances time and time again. And then when we got it forward, Liam Ryan was just unbelievable. I mean, the way he stood up, and he said afterwards, I had to play the JK role, bursting out of the goal square, taking those hangers, kicking so truly. I mean, it was just the Liam Ryan of the second half of last season, and that makes such a big difference to the team. So it was awesome to watch that up close. Yeah,
interesting, isn't it? That what really brought about that amazing run of form from Liam Ryan last season was, I think, Kennedy going out with a concussion, and he was forced to play the JK role. Took it with both hands, just excelled. But then he took that into the rest of the games for the year, even though Kennedy was back in the team. So he's still got, a couple of weeks probably till he's absolutely cherry ripe in terms of his fitness. And even Simo said it seemed like before the game that maybe he was carrying a little hip injury. So, it was a massive performance from him. And just on the dominance in terms of clearances, it was our best differential for contested ball for the entire season and our second best clearance differential. So, we certainly got, like you said, Carlton were right for the picking in terms of their midfield. It's still unacceptable that Carlton produced that performance against a team that's so undermanned when they talked themselves up as a finals fancy.
And they're playing the same ground 2 weeks in a row and had stayed in Sydney all week. Like, how much more preparation can you have in your favour than that?
Yeah. Look, to be honest, it just looked to me like Carlton, they actually don't know how to dominate and win games. Like, West Coast we were there. We were right there for the picking, and Carlton couldn't do it. And credit to us for being in the game early and taking advantage of Carlton's, not hesitance, but whatever word you want to call it. And then we were then too good in the end, and you could tell in the last quarter that we had them beat. So with Shepherd going out with concussion, at that point I already felt maybe we'd lost too many. With Shepherd going out, that looked like a massive blow, but we were able to cover it. So pretty impressive. If you want to give us your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Garby, hard to pick. A lot of players played pretty well.
Yeah, I will do. In a moment, though, because I want to talk about Flying's hanger just for a second. Like, let's just dwell on a mark like that. You know what? I've watched it a couple times now. The amazing thing about his marks is that it's pure vertical leap some of the time. Like, sometimes he gets a run and he gets a leap, like most players do when they take a hanger. But this one on Stocker, I think he had like one step, maybe two, and then he's up on his shoulder. There's no one else helping him. There's no one else running next to him to give him a bit of a lift alongside him. There's no momentum going into a contest. It is like one jump up onto a bloke's shoulder, lift, eyes perfectly on the ball, and takes a mark. Like, I don't think many players can take hangers like that in the competition at all, and have done through history. So not only does he take brilliant marks time and time again, but he takes them in the most unique way.
Now, I've got a theory on this, Garby. I think that it's almost better for him to take these marks off the short run, because if he gets too much momentum up, he flies over the top of the pack and just gets out of control and ends up dropping the mark. He has these insane that, like, they'd be mark of the millennium if he holds some of these that he goes for in games. But it's almost too spectacular. He's almost too good an athlete. So I reckon just go off the short run. Short run. Jump on their back, grab your mark, and he's an absolute freak. Yeah. I mean, he's absolutely in the conversation for the best high flyer of all time, and he's still got a long time to fill out the highlight reel.
For sure.
He's a genuine superstar.
He's just a freak. So he got my 5 votes. I know it was pretty tight looking at all the votes between Nick and Flying, but I thought Liam set it up for us with his 2 goals in the first quarter and the way he was marking the ball and just driving us forward. And then in the third quarter with his 2 goals, that gave us the lead at 3-quarter time, which put us in a strong position. And the hanger gave us a lot of energy. I just thought he ran them ragged all game. Like, Jack was pretty well held by Wiedering, who's an all-Australian defender, but he kept working hard. Liam Ryan was the spark up forward that won us the game, as good as Nick was. So he got my 5. And Natanui, the 4, he was unbelievable in the ruck. And that smother and then handball to Gaffey for that goal was a brilliant bit of individual play. Dom Sheed, the 3, fantastic. He was everywhere, won it in the middle, won it on the outside, kicked a big goal early. Gaffey, the 2, really good game from him. He looks to be, again, back to his best. Big smother and handball for Ryan in the first quarter. That was a big moment. Or the third quarter, was it, for Ryan's 4th goal? And that really got us going again. So weird to see Gaffey doing those sorts of things. Doesn't often do that deep in our forward line, but that was great. And then I really struggled for the one between Tom Barrass and Shannon Hearn. Hearney's kicking early on was great, but I gave it to Barrass just because I think it was awkward when he lost his matchup of Mackay, and he didn't really have a matchup down forward. And I thought the way in which he zoned off the guy he was on to take big mark after big mark time and time again was just so important for us as the game wore on. So Tommy Barrass got my 1, but gee, Shannon Hearn was really unlucky.
Yeah, it was a tough one. I reckon there was 10 or 11 players who I could have given votes to. So I spent some time thinking about when. So I probably leaned. Nick and Flying Ryan were obviously the 2 obvious ones. I went with 5 for Nick because I felt that the dominance of the midfield, his performance as captain, and then in the last quarter, he dragged us over the line with a few clearances and some physicality around the ball. Just thought overall, if Nick's not playing, we just don't win that game. And that's happened a number of times this season. So Nick gets the 5 from me, Flying Ryan with 4, was absolutely superb, could have easily got the 5. And then, like you, I went Sheed and Gaff with 3 and 2. I just felt the midfield was so instrumental on a day where we needed them to stand up, where we were really low on numbers. They did that. And obviously, Sheed's had a really good last couple of his, rebound accuracy of his kicking and all that sort of thing. We come to expect that. But with Shepherd out of the game, Hearn became even more important. And a shout out from me to Zach Langdon, who played absolutely his best game for the club by a long way. His work up the ground was good. His skills were neat and tidy, which they haven't really been so far. He impressed me with his work around the ball, provided an option, through the middle of the ground as well. So great to see.
Yeah, Zach Langdon was excellent. His chasing and tackling, fantastic. So, yeah, really impressed with the way he went about it. So he got a few votes, Zach Langdon, from some fans. That was good to see. Nick Natanui and Liam Ryan were the 2 main contenders. It was that tight for the 5. Nick finished on 66, Liam Ryan on 64. So he was just edged out by Natanui. It was that tight. Dom Sheed, 51, Andrew Gaff, 20, and then Tom Barrass, 9. So Natanui gets the 5, Liam Ryan the 4, Dom Sheed the 3, Andrew Gaff the 2, Tom Barrass the 1 from the win over Carlton. And that means on the Nest medal leaderboard, Nick Natanui is back in front. So he goes up to 23 votes, 2 ahead of Tim Kelly on 21, Jack Darling on 20, Tom Barrass gets a vote. He's up to 17. Dom Sheed on 15 now. Oscar Allen, 13. Sorry, Andrew Gaff, 14. Oscar Allen, 13. So there has been a little change in the leaderboard. Nick Natanui out in front by a couple over Tim Kelly in the Nest medals. So it's going to be a tight race, but the big man, Nick, doing his best. Now, I think that brings us into the Richmond game on the weekend. Drewy, how do you feel about the fixture change? And crucially, what changes do we need to beat, obviously, a quality team in the Tigers, which would just give us even more momentum going into the bye and more confidence about still challenging for this flag?
Well, I've got to be honest. I think the fixture being moved forward a week is a bit of a blow for us. Just given the injuries and maybe a few players being a bit sore and needing a rest, I think the weekend off would have done us a lot of good heading into what is a massive clash against Richmond. It just feels like we've probably got a few too many out, which is unfortunate because I was really looking forward to taking on Richmond on our home deck, hopefully full strength with a couple of, premiership contenders sort of having at it. and having a really competitive stoush, similar to the game in 2018 when we got a really good win against them at Optus Stadium. Doesn't feel like that this time around. We're probably not quite where we need to be in terms of challenging for the premiership. And even Richmond have been off the boil a little bit at times this season, though seem to be trending in the right direction. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that we're not at full strength. But that, those are the breaks during COVID. So you can understand why the AFL want to get that fixture out of the way and Richmond can get back home to Victoria. So sounds like Josh Kennedy will come back into the side after having his rest. Nearly missed that last game against Essendon, but get some time to freshen up. Oscar Allen comes out of concussion protocol. So there's two pretty handy ins to start with. Again, Liam Duggan I'm reading today, was potentially in the mix if the game had have been on that Thursday night, but now it probably comes a little bit too soon for him. And then I guess Brander and Archie are kind of, wait and sees. So there's a few potential ins. But now the youngsters sort of, potentially a chance to hold their spot as well. What do you think?
Yeah, just on the fixture change, Simo said we have to play ball. Other clubs are doing it much tougher than we are. We get to play at home. We get to stay at home. We get to train normally. So we're happy to adjust by a week. Look at St Kilda. They're losing Tim Membry and Seb Ross this week because they have to go home to be with their young families. So, it could be a lot worse. And I think we've done the right thing. And I don't think anyone can really complain too much when you take that into account. So, Kennedy, Allen come back in. So I think Bailey Williams goes out this week. I think he really struggled for confidence against the Blues. Like he missed a couple of ruck taps early. They kicked a goal off one. He gave a handball away to the opposition in defence in the first quarter. Sam Walsh kicked a goal from it. And then I was watching him closely. He was leading, but he had zero confidence in his face that he was going to take marks. He just really seemed to drop away in terms of his self-belief as the game wore on. And it might be time for a rest for him. And with Oscar coming back, especially considering Richmond don't have Nankervis, I think it's one game where you say, Nick, maybe you just play 5 to 10% more than you usually do. You got the bye next week, so just go really hard. And Oscar, just chip in. You'll be up against Chol and Coleman Jones. They're not big bodies. You'll be fine. Just chip in a second ruck for this week, please. It's not something we want to do long term, but for this week we can handle it. So I'd like to see that happen. I don't think Petruccelli will play. He really struggled with a sort of groin kind of injury. And I think if Shep hadn't gone off, Petch would have gone off. I think he battled through. He played deep forward out of the square. And I think he tried to give them something and sort of consume a Carlton defender, if you like. But I think in a normal situation, he probably would have spent more time on the bench. So wouldn't be surprised if he struggles to come up. So, yeah, and then Shepherd goes out as well. So coming back in is Kennedy, Allen. I think Jones comes in as well off the bench. And then Petruccelli drops out along with Shep and Bailey Williams. And I think those are the three changes that we make, and maybe we just have to rejig things a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense. I think Oscar Allen's a massive inclusion this week. Obviously, great to have him in the forward line. The chop out, as you mentioned, for Nick Naitanui in place of Williams makes a lot of sense. With Nankervis not playing, who's a pretty physical ruckman, but to have Nankervis not playing, not jumping into Nick Nat at every bounce, that's a massive advantage. Like Chol and Coleman Jones, especially Chol, is not a physical ruckman. Like he's athletic, and he'll give Nick a bit of a runaround. And he played really well against Essendon, but he's not going to hurt Nick. He's not going to bang into him over and over. So Nick should be fresh through the game. Coleman Jones is still young and learning, but we do have to look out for him when he's up forward. He's kicked 6 goals over the last couple of games. So even Oscar potentially plays a role there if required to roll back, particularly having young Harry Edwards in the side who's still developing, still a little bit raw. Like he has a few moments where you're like, he's only played 6 games, you can tell. And Barras is going to have his hands full potentially with Revolt. So it's interesting how those matchups shake down. And look, if we're desperate, surely Jake Waterman can take a few centre bounces if required. We've got plenty of tall players in the team. I'm sure we could work it out. Isn't Edwards 200 centimetres? We could roll him in the ruck for
Yeah,
a
well, he's
little
played
bit
ruck
if required.
before, and he's spoken about that. Like he said, I can chip in again. I worry about us being too tall this week against Richmond. We know how good they are at ground level. We know how good they are at spreading and covering the ground. And if you go in too tall against them, they can blitz you, and that's a big concern. So I wonder if Jake Waterman's place in the team is in doubt. Again, he didn't have a great game against Carlton. Like, he was okay. He seems to be struggling for confidence a bit at the moment. He got out-muscled by Liam Jones late, looked really frustrated by that. I wonder if he's potentially on the chopping block as well. And what do we do down back? So if Shepherd goes out, do we just have enough defenders there already? You know, Barras takes Rewalt potentially, or Coleman Jones. Who takes the other key forward? Okay, Edwards is down there. So are they going to try stretch us with another tall? I'm just not sure about the Waterman mix in this game, and whether it's one tall too many again, as we've spoken about, and another one should come in.
Yeah, it's hard with Duggan, Witherden, and now Shepherd all out. There's a few sort of medium-sized defenders we're missing there, but Nelson can play that role. You know, obviously we've got Rotham down there. Hearn can do a job, and I guess we'll get another good look at Luke Foley and see what he's capable of, because the medium to small forwards for Richmond have been a massive part of their success over the last 4 years. You know, they may not be in the best form of their careers right now, but, you know, Castagna kicked 3 goals last week. Shea Bolton is a threat, depending on whether he's in midfield or forward. But either way, you know, someone this week compared him to Chris Judd in terms of his impact as a young player. And maybe that's probably going over the top a little bit, but still, you know, he's a sensational young player, out of contract and West Australian, I might add. You know, Dan Rioli hasn't done much of late. Jake Art's a role player. So, you know, there's going to be guys to be looked after in the Richmond forward line. So, it's going to be intriguing to see how we match up on them. Obviously, Tom Cole is having a sneaky good season, Garby.
No surprise.
Cole's
you know what Tom Cole does really well? I noticed this on the weekend. So Carlton gets an extra man over the top, and you can tell they've got a free person and they can break on a wing. He's so good at sensing that and attacking the ball carrier. He did it on the weekend, and he put a big tackle on Cottrell, and he's like, okay, I know that if they get this clear, like, we're exposed, but if I can force them to slow down here, we can win it back. And he just attacked Cottrell, and he does it a lot of times, Tommy Cole, and he lays a big tackle and affects the play that way. He just reads the game really well. He's fantastic. The big question is who matches up on Dusty. So I heard Simo speaking today on the Eagles website and the Ask Simo question, and he said Dusty spends as much time forward as he does back. We're not scared to tag him if we feel that's the way to go about it, but you need someone who can match him out of the square. Jackson Nelson comes to mind automatically, and I think Nelson might get the job on Dusty reading between the lines, a flat-out tag. If he gets beaten, maybe Tommy Cole goes to him and gets asked to do that job.
Interesting, isn't it? One of the big challenges with Dustin Martin is the handover. So I would guess that Elliot Yeo probably stands on Martin in the centre square, but then he does this, you know, that little drift forward. Like, the communication just needs to be absolutely tip-top between, like, let's say Yeo or the Eagles midfielders, and if it's going to be Nelson that takes him, that handover has to be faultless, because you give him an inch, he will take a mile, and he'll kick 5 and get 3 Brownlow votes. So, last time we saw him at Optus Stadium, you know, it was kind of Yeo and Martin head-to-head in the midfield. Probably not going to be quite the same this time around, but he generally plays well against West Coast. I think he's in the West Coast are in the top 5 teams in terms of his average coaches' votes or Brownlow votes or something. So he generally performs well against us. So hopefully we can shut him down. And just on Bailey Williams, I know you touched on it before. He's just having a few moments, isn't he, where he's just getting in his own way. Looks like he needs a bit of a confidence boost in the twos. And whether they'd look at Jamison, whether it's too early for him at some stage this season, but he just has a few little kinks that he needs to iron out. I like the fact that he's aggressive and he flies the flag. You know, he's got a bit of mongrel about him. I know Dermot Brereton loves him because he's from Frankston here in Victoria, which is a notable tough area. But yeah, he's got a bit of rawness to him, which he needs to sort of iron out of his game. that moment in the third quarter, I think, where he kept the ball in the forward pocket and he should have just let it run out, and they ended up getting a goal out of it. A few frustrating Bailey moments, but hopefully, with a bit of time, he can iron out those kinks.
Who plays on Liam Ryan? Because it's a really tough matchup for the opposition to deal with, because you got to go with him in the air, but then if you put someone who's too tall than him, he'll just try to run you up the ground and get a
maybe Grimes.
That way. Yeah, Grimes. But then I'm looking at that. So I think Bolter takes Kennedy or Darling, and Grimes takes the other one. I think it's probably Broad. I think it might be Broad who gets Ryan, because he's got good leg speed and he's tall. Maybe that's the player they send to him.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout. Broad's a good player. There's a reason why he's got 3 premierships to his name. I wonder where that leaves Vlosten, because he can be so important for them behind the ball. Like, if you let Vlosten start taking intercept marks and dictating the tempo, that's usually spells danger. And then Hula's the other one that we've got to be careful of. He's getting on a little bit, but as far as a halfback distributor goes, he's been one of the best in the business for a long time. So there's a lot of guys to worry about, isn't there, when you look at their team?
I think we can win this midfield battle, though, and that gives me a bit of confidence that we can win the game, even without Shuey and Kelly, because they're going to lose Prestia, who's injured again. They'll still have Cochin and Bolton and Dusty when he goes in there, but we know that they're not the deepest team in terms of on-ball threats. Richmond, that's not where they get you. They get you just on the outside with all their runners there and just being hard at the ball all the way through the game and all over the ground. But if we can win those clearances again, like we did against the Blues, with a couple of extra numbers in there, I think we might be able to get it going enough that we can win this. It's going to be a really tight game. I think, they go in slight favourites, but not warm favourites. And, if we bring the same energy and the same mentality into this one, we can win it, and that would be just enormous going into the bye. Nick needs to have a massive game. If he can dominate the ruck, and we can just use our 1 or 2 extra numbers in there in terms of contested ball winners to get us going, we can do this. And hopefully JK's fresh after a week off, and the same with Oscar Allen, and they can clunk him and kick Truly, and Liam has a big game again as well.
I think that's a really good place to leave it, Garby. I think we should be optimistic.
Yeah.
And it's, no matter what happens, again, it's still a young side. We're getting experience into some of these players. We're getting a look at them, and we can have a genuine crack at trying to get this win. I almost feel like, because we get one against the odds against Carlton, it's not a free hit, but it just makes me feel a bit more relaxed going into the game.
Yeah.
I don't have any lingering doubts about, are we up for the fight? The mentality seems really strong, and no doubt that the whole club is going to be buoyed by the win against Carlton. Gives us a really nice platform to go into the Richmond game and hopefully, maybe knock the reigning premiers off their perch.
Wouldn't that be good? And I know that Richmond ran over the top of the Bombers in the end. The Bombers still had the lead in the final quarter. So, they found a way to get through the Tigers as well. Hopefully we can. What a win it would be. That would be awesome. So let's hope the boys can do it. And we can start getting really confident, believe it or not, after some of the things we've said in the first half of the season about challenging for the flag once more. What a win over the Blues. Thanks for your Nest Medal votes. Thanks for listening. Let's go and beat the Tigers on Sunday night at Optus.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.